Hello and welcome to Europa Universalis 4. I am Lord Forwind here with another country guide. This one updated for Golden Century for Portugal. So I'm going to assume you have Golden Century, which is the one that enhances Portugal, Spain, Grenada, and Morocco. But I'll try and point out those areas that are unique to Golden Century. So Portugal is what's considered a Tier 1 country, as in it's one of the more important countries during this time period, and as such has lots of events, decisions, and is interesting to play. You start here in Western Iberia with 131 development. Most of your land is in Iberia. You do own the Azores Islands. You also own Madeira down here, and more importantly, you own a province in North Africa called Ceuta, which is Sunni and rebellious, but we'll get to that in a bit. So Portugal is probably the most trading colonial focused nation in the game, pretty much bar none. Their combat strength for them is terrible. So if you're going to play Portugal, which is usually considered one of the easier nations to play, you're not going to be able to launch immense wars of conquest and, take over vast areas like some other country that's green that shall remain nameless. But you do have one of the strongest trading stuff. So the Portuguese ideas are 5% trade efficiency, which is really good. Could be better. 30% trade range, it's okay. And if you finish all their ideas, you of course get plus 20 global tariffs, which is of course encouraging you to go a colonial route and get plenty of colonies, probably in South Africa and some in the southern North American provinces. So your first one is Legacy of the Navigator, plus 25% sailors, plus 25% colonial reign. This alone should allow you to get to the Caribbean or South Africa long before anyone else does, which means you have a very good chance of popping colonialism in 1500 if you play properly. The next idea is they've got the Alphonsine Ordinance, plus 10 goods produced, which is nice. Feltoras, which is plus 10 global trade power. This is going to be very handy when you start steering like a third of the world's trade to the Sevilla trade node down here, because you have quite a lot in that area. Then you get encourage the Bandeirantes, plus 1 merchant. Probably said that wrong. Whatever. Royal Absolutism, negative 15% construction costs, plus 0.1 yearly absolutism. Honestly, the yearly absolutism is more useful than the construction cost, but at this point you should have tons of money to invest in your provinces and get lots of factories and pretty much trade buildings willy-nilly. Land Before Faith, plus 15% global settler increase. Very useful for colonizers. Lower than what Spain will get and some of the others, but Portugal did not create the vast colonial empires that France, England, and Spain did. They pretty much focused on Brazil and some Caribbean. And then you get another 10% trade efficiency. So totally you get plus 15% trade efficiency from their ideas, which means their goal is to pretty much steer all trade to this node, the Sevilla trade node. True Castile probably will still be dominating the node, but with greater trade efficiency, you'll actually be making as much, if not more, than Castile or Spain will be doing so. So first things first, let's just take a quick glance at their decisions. So they've got the standard ones for Catholics. The one that is unique to them, to some degree, is the Societas Jesu, essentially the Jesuit Society, which you hit Admin Tech 10. It will give you plus 1 missionary strength and plus 0.5 papal yearly influence. This is really handy because if you decide to play a slightly more aggressive Portugal, you're probably going to be converting a lot of Sunni land down here. And if you take over Africa and don't build trade companies, you will also be trying to deal with quite a lot of non-Catholic land. So to start off as Portugal, we'll just quickly run down the last things. You start off in a regency. Alfonso V, the Infante Pedro. He's a half-decent ruler with a total of a 7 skill, which is below average because average is 8 or 9. The heir is 7 as well. He'll take over in roughly 3 or so years. He's a reasonably good ruler. He's expansionist by default, so you can get colonizing faster. You also start with, and this is something a lot of people don't know, you start off with an explorer at day 1. So you can actually start exploration missions down West Africa long before anyone else can. You're probably not going to get tons of land down there unless you're going for the Henry the Navigator achievement, which is in fact to reach have a province in Africa, India, and Indonesia before 1500. I've already done a separate guide on that. It should still largely hold true in this update, so you can go and check that out. But it's worth getting exploring early on as them. They also, Portugal, if you have Golden Century, you can build a flagship. I actually don't have enough money, so actually my navy is too small, so I can't actually fully demonstrate that, which is a problem. That's awkward. I don't actually have enough sailors. Let's see if I can find a way around that. Actually, I could probably do this. Yes. That should potentially work. Oh, I have to employ more ships. Okay, well, anyway, Portugal has some unique stuff they get from Golden Century that allows them to do unique flagships, which is really handy. One of the greatest things about the Portuguese is that they get a unique upgrade for their flagship through Golden Century that allows 50% or so cheaper barrages. Which is really handy early game if you've got Golden Century, because now you can actually blast your way through forts early on when most people can't. It works out particularly well for you, which means while you're trying to take Africa and all the other island provinces, you should bring your fleet with them with the flagship upgraded to that level, and you'll be able to reasonably easy barrage forts and take them long before anyone else has cannon. I'm sorry I didn't realize that I couldn't build the flagship. My bad. Suffice to say, it's useful. Also, in Golden Century, you have the unique government form, a tier 3, called Council of the Indies. It means expelling minorities are 30% cheaper. If you combine that with some of the other ideas for expulsion, specifically exploration ideas, you'll get a 55% cheaper minorities expulsion cost. This means expelling people to your colonies, which have to be in the New World. They are significantly cheaper. It's a very good way of converting both culture and religion, specifically from like North Africa, because colonial nations have no penalty for different religions or cultures. But if you do it, it takes time. It will make your colony develop faster, have more development, and when at the end of it, it will convert either the religion or the culture, depending on how much you paid and what choice you made when you're exporting them. They also have some other minority stuff. I believe they have exploration range and probably, I can't remember the other one offhand. So, how to play Portugal, now that we've kind of run down most of the unique things about Portugal. Their mission trait, we'll just say, pretty much tries to lead them to either gather trade, or build a fleet, gather trade, conquer North Africa, specifically in the Morocco region. Historically, Castile and then Spain would go after this region. Portugal tended to stick more on this side. So that's going to be your first kind of goal. It depends how fast you want to colonize. If you don't want to colonize particularly fast, your first idea should probably be religious ideas, just so you can convert the Sunni land up here. Don't forget, of course, that if you can do enforce religious unity and speed up conversion strength. Also over here, we also have the Holy Orders for Golden Century for Portugal. This also comes in very handy. If you own all the states of a province in the region, so in this case, North Morocco, you'd have to own all these 5. You can put a Holy Order in charge for like 50 of each monarch point, and they give a different bonus. Plus, they also develop the region, so Jesuits, +1 tax, Dominicans, +1 production. Also gets rid of slaves, which is important to notice. And the Franciscans give +1 manpower, and they have their obvious effects. If you use Jesuits combined with the religious conversion edict, You may not even need to go religious, but I find it tends to make a bit more stable of a start. That's only if you want to conquer. If you don't want to conquer, you'll probably want to start exploration, so you can actually recruit more explorers when you are starting one dies, plus the 50% colonial range. The moment you get that, you will also get plus 25, which if you have colonized down here, and then there's another island down here, or you colonize Argun, you should be able to make it to South America roughly around 1460, 1470. If you're slow, 1480. It is important to notice that you do get two idea groups reasonably quick. So you can actually do religious ideas first, and then if you want, jump over to exploration ideas. Probably your third idea for Portugal should be expansion, just for the additional colonists and the trade and all the bonus trade power you get here, which is very useful. After that, it's kind of up to where you go. In terms of national ideas, I would probably recommend something like defensive ideas, just so that you have a military that can actually fight people. Trade ideas are going to be a necessity later on. And you probably don't need admin unless you're conquering a lot. Influence is rather useless. Espionage, not so useful. Economic is pretty solid for the cheaper development, plus the 10% cheaper construction stacked with your national idea will give you 25% if you care about that. I never found maritime or naval ideas to be that useful, but it's really up to you if you want to do it. You should be able to field a larger navy than pretty much everybody except for maybe Castile and England. So the odds of them actually fighting you are low, because you will get an event that will give you you already start off allied to England, first off. And one of the first things you should do is a royal marriage with them, because there's a potential that you can inherit England. I've had it happen once. It was amazing. It was weird, and I got crushed by France in the 100 Years' War. It's important to notice that when the 100 Years' War starts, the actual event that England that starts the 100 Years' War again, if the English don't surrender Maine, is that England will actually attack France. Therefore, you will not be called into that war, so you don't actually have to worry about that. The other thing you should do immediately, if you can, is offer an alliance to Castile, and depending on how Castile and Aragon's relationship is, which in this case they've rivaled me, you can also ally yourself to Aragon. Be aware they're probably going to fall under the Iberian Union of Castile reasonably early on, so the odds of you keeping them as an ally are slim to none going forward. It's not usually worth trying to invade Granada early on, because Castile gets claims on that, and that could cost you an alliance. But if you're risky, you actually can, because you border them across the sea province. You also border them across the sea province here, which is really weird. So essentially you can fabricate claims and try and attack them. You do have a longer truce than Castile does, a year longer, so the odds of you attacking before Castile are, of course, low. But the Castilian alliance, and then later Spanish and English alliance, you can probably hold that for the vast majority of the game. Everyone will like you. They'll come to your aid. Mostly, Europe does not concern you. Pretty much anything over here, other than maybe Tunis, so maybe this, shouldn't concern you at all. Probably going north, so maybe more like this. The only way you'd ever care about this is if France invades Iberia, or the Ottomans start protecting North Africa, guaranteeing or alliancing people, in which case you will have to fight them. In terms of actual starting moves now, so we already have an alliance with England, we're allying Castile. You can try to ally someone like France or something. The other thing you might want to do is send a diplomat over to the Pope and try and get more papal influence, because Portugal and Iberia tend not to convert or even have much troubles with the Reformation. So you should pretty reliably be able to keep good influence going with the Pope. One of your first moves should probably either be, because you won't be able to convert Ceuta down here immediately unless you're lucky enough to roll a missionary advisor, which is unlikely. It's probably to raise autonomy. Either that or throw it under the hands of the clergy. I tend to like tossing it under the clergy because they reduce the unrest. And they don't actually boost missionary strength anymore, which is unfortunate. But they do make it cheaper to convert whenever you get around to doing so, which is a nice little bonus. That will mostly solve the Ceuta problem. Either that or you can raise autonomy like that. Pretty much keeps them happy. You're not going to be able to fight Morocco head-on on your own. You'll need Castile for that. And unfortunately, Portugal starts off reasonably poor. You start off with a reasonably solid army. You'll probably want to build up roughly like that. 3 infantry, 1 cavalry, obviously. You'll also want to get some ships in it so that you can build a flagship, which I wasn't able to show you. And if you go colonialization, you want to try and snag this province here before Castile does. Be aware that you will have to do a exploration mission along the coast, unfortunately. Even though Spain has a colony there, you don't actually know what this province is, even though you know what this one is. It's a little weird. In terms of actual rapid growth, if you want to do Henry the Navigator, check that video out. If you want to play Portugal, by and large, you want to focus diplomatic power. Your ruler and heir are pretty good at admin, so you should get to admin tech 4 reasonably fast. I recommend probably taking a admin advisor and probably a diplomatic advisor rather than a military advisor, because you're not going to be able to fight any wars without Castile's aid anyway. But since you're historical friends, they'll tend to stay allies with you. You actually start with 60 trust. Same thing with England. And once you're able to call on Castile to help you in wars versus Morocco, so long as they don't have, all these allies or the Ottomans, you'll beat them. Even more if Castile gets the Iberian Union. At that point, you can pretty much declare war with Castile's help and let them do all the fighting. You take all the land. Just be aware you don't really want to expand this direction. Castile gets missions and claims on that area. In terms of where to colonize, obviously I can't see the New World at the moment. But if I could, you want to, of course, try and get to South America as soon as you can. There's usually 1 or 2 provinces on the coast that you can reach before anyone else does. At that point, you got to decide where you want to expand. In my experience, and historically, Brazil is a very solid point for Portugal. It's wealthy, it's large, it has gold, it has plenty of resources, and it steers trade to Sevilla, unlike some of the Canadian trade node and stuff, which doesn't. The other good place is, of course, if you can, the Caribbean. Pick those 2 up. You'll be making lots of money from your colonial nations. Be aware you need 5 colonies to form a colonial nation, at which point, if you're Catholic, the Pope likes you, they'll declare that that land belongs to you, and most Catholic nations will not colonize that region. But Protestant or Anglican England, of course, will. So be aware of that. Doesn't mean your colonial nation will colonize on your own, so you, of course, have to probably support it for a little while. But by late game, Brazil will be giving you lots of money. I mean, this tariff bonus, 20% tariff, stacking with the tariff bonus from here, 10, you'll be getting a reasonable amount of money from your colonies. Once you get your colonial nations up and running, you have to decide what you're going to do about Africa. Trade companies are a necessity for Portugal to get enough merchants. I think I had, in my most recent Portugal game, like 15 or 16 merchants steering trade. I was making absurd amounts of money from Portugal. Some people advocate as Portugal try and kill Castile or vice versa. You can. It's hard. It gets you Iberia, makes you even more money, but does make you involved in the continental politics of war, which you're not particularly good at. But if you can, South Africa is one of those areas you want to try and pick up. You should be able to invade and conquer Madagascar without much trouble. And if you can, the Kilwa region over here, Zanzibar area, has lots of gold. If you can take over that, you're good. And due to your colonial range, you should easily get over to Indonesia long before anyone else does. That's reasonably it. Most of your missions will kind of steer in that way. You see, get South Africa, you get permanent claims, colonize the Caribbean. You get a lot of nice little bonuses that will help you. One of the key things is this one, promote the Bandeirantes. You'll get increased chance of discovering gold. This is in Brazil, Minas Gerais. You have to get Rio to 2 and own all the regions, but it'll give you a good income from the colonial nation. They'll actually send you gold periodically on trade ships, which is nice. This one down here, established Jesuit missions. It says 7 states in colonial Brazil, either owned by you or your non-tributary subjects, have an assigned holy order. It's not any holy order, it has to be the Jesuits. That tripped me up for a bit in my campaign. But if you do, you get +2 yearly papal influence, which is amazing. You also get other events like Portuguese Oman. If you complete it, you'll get trade power and defense of this for a while. As you'll see, this will steer you into Indonesia, Malacca. There's a nice little event right here, trade with Cathay. If you've got 15% trade power in the Southern Chinese trade node and they like you to some degree, you will actually buy Macau from them, which is nice, which is a center of trade. Of course, they'll probably hate you after, but it's a free province in China, which is always appreciated. Rivalries. Probably don't want to rival too many people who attack you. Morocco, Grenada, Tunis are the safe ones. I wouldn't get involved with France because they might actually attack you. I know, isn't it weird? And other than that, you know, the standard starts, raise diplomatic, seek support of the clergy. You can get a good amount of admin power from them. Specifically military, your nobles have a lot of control over your state or your country. So going curtail noble privileges is a reasonably solid thing to do. One weakness you really have is you don't have a lot of manpower. So strengthening noble privileges also could work, but I prefer the tax income. The biggest issue for Portugal early on is until you get your colonial nations going and get, you know, trade companies steering trade into Portugal, you don't make a lot of money. So you do have to play a little bit careful. Remember, you can in fact mothball forts. If you're lucky, Castile will be a great power and give you subsidies. I've had that happen once. It was useful. Lisbon is a pretty nice province. Don't forget, if you can, to upgrade your centers of trade when you can. The other thing you can do, and it is a bit of a crazy thing to do, but you can actually, of course, assign states. But you can also try and develop the Renaissance very quickly in Lisbon, using mainly military power and admin, and then, of course, so you can colonize faster. And other than that, you're in Europe, so you'll get institutions reasonably quick. You're rich, no one will really bother you. And there is one other achievement as Portugal. I'll just quickly mention it. It's one of the easiest achievements in the game, so it's not worth a guide on its own. It's called Not So Sad of a State, as Portugal have a colony in Brazil and Africa. This actually counts as Africa, so you just need a colony in Brazil. Yeah, it's that simple. Usually. Unless they've changed it, in which case any of your colonies that you'll colonize here work as well. Anyway, that is a quick summary as Portugal. I don't think I'm missing anything. If anybody knows what I'm missing, please leave it in the comments to help other people. And for those of you who have never watched my videos, please subscribe, like them, and check out the Let's Play I try and do every day of Europa. And check out all the other guides I have for this game as well. And I will see you guys all in another guide video. Bye for now.